Hi, my name is Rita Evans, and I am a librarian here at UC Berkeley in Transportation Studies, and it is my pleasure to introduce the speakers for this afternoon's sessions. And I want to be sure that everybody understands what's going on with this next part of the program. We will have 4 different sets of speakers who are going to come up here, and they're going to give you a brief preview. They're going to give you a lightning talk, and then those same topics they will explore in depth at a session following this one. So you're going to have a chance to hear these 4 different topics now. You get to pick which of them you'd like to hear in more detail. So we hope that this part of the program whets your appetite. You may already have selected which session you want to attend for the in-depth part, but perhaps hearing the speakers are going to make you change your mind and decide you want to go to a different one. So without further ado, let me introduce our first 2 speakers who are from UC Berkeley, Joe Cera and Michael Lindsay, who will be speaking on evaluating institutional repository statistics inside and outside the institution.
Hi, my name's Joe. Mike is sitting down here. He'll talk during the more exciting part of this. So I'm not really going to give like a summary of what we're doing, but I'm going to give the build-up. But basically what Mike and I are doing is we're creating a prototype of a service that's going to make gathering statistics for the institutional repository mean a little more and make my job easier. So it's all, as far as I'm concerned, it's a great project. So kind of like getting started with any new project, this is in my mind, this is how I see it. You know, I want to start something new, there's some action, and then I wait for feedback. And you know, I'm very detail oriented, so black boxes are good. So my feedback so far is since April of last year, we have 6,500 documents in the digital repository. We're approaching 1 million downloads for all time. The bPress is our host for the repository site, and they say that we're getting to 1 million faster than anybody else they've had, so that's good. I keep telling my friends and family, and they don't care. So for me, one of the challenges is, you know, providing useful statistics, and the repository is pretty much just documents and downloads. Those are the statistics I get. So I think initially, you know, I have these 2 things. I should just be able to push them together, and that seems really easy. So what I'm going to do is make my statistics look really good. But then, you know, I start thinking about when people ask me for statistics, like, what is the purpose? You know, what do you need them for? Because obviously, you can, as we saw earlier, you can use statistics to lie, and I want that lie to make us look good. So you know, if it's for marketing, you want to chop it up some way, preservation, you know, that's important to people. All these things, for me, the only one I care about is pride. The rest of it is fine. But, so you know, they're all the same numbers, but kind of how we show them is going to make a difference. And in the same way, you know, the audience makes a difference. Librarians care about, you know, what certain statistics say. Repository managers care about mostly their own, but also other people's statistics. Authors care about download counts and rankings, and I'm not sure what else, but pretty much those 2 things. Journal editors, you know, they might want to know what's popular, so they can, when they're selecting articles, they can decide what, you know, what should get selected. And you know, each of these groups have kind of different needs and motivations. So again, it's kind of like 2 different variables to decide how to display this data. So one of the kind of common ways right now that's available is things like the ROAR group and the Open Door group, which they basically will take statistics from repositories, and you can compare repositories to other repositories. And that's cool, but the only problem is that you know, when you're looking at kind of repository statistics as a whole, they lose a lot of meaning. Like, you know, you might have 10,000 items in your repository, maybe a bunch of those are pictures, and people look at pictures, people don't really download pictures, so, you know, your statistics might look different than somebody else's. So comparing repositories as a whole is a really difficult thing to do. But most of these kind of efforts are free and easily accessible. And then, you know, kind of things that other people want that are more, you know, proprietary and close off, you know, a lot of access are things that do rankings because, you know, everybody's a little vain and we all want to see where we compare. And so there's, you know, a group that ranks repositories, and what that means, I don't know. And, you know, you can probably comb through their website and they'll give you some sort of answer, and it might mean something to you and it might mean nothing, but it's a ranking, and that's, you know, if you're on top, that's cool, and who cares? Who cares about the reason? And then there's SSRN, who has quickly become my nemesis because they, you know, they have this established ranking system. Everybody likes it because it has a rank, and that's really interesting. But, you know, what kind of system won't let you put links in your description to link away from their website? Like, it feels shady, but, you know, it happens. But of course, because they have this established system, you can't really do anything about it. So I thought, you know, my repository has part of this information, the repository as a whole, and as far as, you know, information about kind of more granular stuff. So I take what I have, which is the repository statistics, take what I want, which are rankings, and just mash them together. And so, you know, the idea was create a service that is collection-based, so you can, if you want to view, you know, repositories against other repositories, you can do that. Provide a system that, you know, lets you look at how different, you know, different articles compare to other articles, look at how authors compare to other authors based on various, you know, various kind of different statistics, different metrics, you know, let the user kind of decide how to use that information. I really want to make SSRN less popular. So if I can, you know, start kind of get into the rankings game, then that's cool, because I'm not trying to make any money off of this. And, you know, if I can hurt SSRN in the process, I win both ways. And so in the same way, you know, like having data that's transparent is really important to me. So normally when I want to do projects like this, I talk to Mike, who's kind of a magician, and I say, this is what I want. And he says, okay, we can do that. And he builds something, and it works. So in my mind, it worked like that. You know, there's this simple little problem. Let me watch that again fast. And that's how it works. But it turns out, once we started talking about it, the reality was it was more black magic. And law libraries don't let you use black magic, apparently. You'd be surprised. Lawyers maybe, but not libraries. So you know, it turns out this problem, giant squid, and you know, it has a lot of kind of different moving parts, and so we kind of had to approach it from a different angle and say, you know, well, what can we start with that's easy, and just kind of build it out, and then hopefully we can start incorporating more repositories, and as we get more people, since it's just the two of us kind of doing this in all of our free time, you know, once we get more people working on it, then we can kind of add the layers of complication and make it, you know, make it more interesting. But for now, what we ended up with is we're building a system that lets me gather statistics better, and, you know, as I said, in the end, I win. So I'm happy about that. And that's it. This presentation button, I'll click that over in the other room.
Well, thank you, Joe. And I will be repeating this information, but Joe and Mike will be in Kinsey East for their full presentation after this session. And now I would like to introduce April Cunningham and Stephanie Rosenblatt, who will be speaking, on small data assessment and action research.
Hi. My name's Stephanie and this is April. What our presentation is going to be about is small data assessment, and we're going to focus on one research methodology that we found to be really useful when looking at small amounts of data, which is called action research. How many of you guys are already familiar with action research? Okay, a few of you, right? Okay, so let me just give our working definition of it to you so you can see if it might apply to your situation. Action research is research done by a practitioner, in our case, the librarian. The research can be started in response to any kind of problem that you've noticed in your own work. The goal of the research is for you to learn something about what's going on so improvements can be made. So you're not doing it just for research's sake. You want to change something that's bugging you. Okay? You can figure out what that is either through thinking back on your own practice, through recording the gripes you and your friends have about your work, from looking at where things just don't seem to be going as well as they should. What's important about this methodology and why I think it's so good for us to use is that it's not solitary. The librarian talks to other people about what she's doing, what's bothering her, what she's trying to find out, and she creates what you could call a group of critical friends. So people she can continually go back to ask for assistance or support, or even just like another interpretation of the data that she's found. Because earlier today we're talking about bias. We're all kind of myopic. We work within our areas of responsibility, and we see them with a certain lens that we've been socialized to look at it with. But it's good when someone outside of that can help us see our data or our situation from another perspective. Throughout the process, the librarian conducting the research reflects on what she's doing or learning. So you think about what you're discovering, not just about the subject you're studying, but also about yourself as a researcher. And you share those realizations with others too. And that's where it becomes powerful as well, because you're showing other people kind of how to do research, and that it's hard, and that it's okay that it's hard. It's okay to not know what you're doing. It's okay to get stuck. That it happens for everyone. You shouldn't feel embarrassed or like you're not capable of doing what you're trying to do. Although it might seem counterintuitive, the researcher shouldn't feel like she has to consult the literature or do a literature review at any time during the process until you think you have to. I don't know how to describe that better. So oftentimes you're saying, oh, you know, I kind of want to study about how students are using materials, and the first thing you want to do is you want to gather some data, so you jump into some databases, because we can do a database, a lit search like nobody else, right? So you're going to do a lot of that searching and reading and reading and reading. You don't have to start from there. It's okay to just start by looking at the data that you already have, and then to go to the literature later. You might not go to the literature until the end of some of your research, because you've developed a theory, and you want to see if it jives with what other people are doing, and that's cool too. Oh, sure. Okay. One of the goals of action research, which I find one of the more important goals, is that it empowers the practitioner, because you should be considered an expert in your own work. And you need to develop that expertise and that confidence to speak about your work to a variety of stakeholders, because you'd rather tell people how to assess your work than have people tell you. So in our session, what you're going to get a chance to do is to articulate questions about your own practice. You're going to learn about various free methods of data collection and analysis, and you're going to hear about some habits of mind that will help you persist through your own messy exploration of ill-defined problems.
Yes. So we recommend our session for practitioners, for people who are actually the ones doing the intervention that Lynn was talking about earlier. So if you're the one who's giving the service, doing the thing, our session will give you a chance to think about those questions that you can ask. Some of you may be managers, though, so I wanted to say a little bit about that. You are welcome at our session if you are interested in doing research about your own work, or if you're interested in hearing why it's so important that practitioner research be messy, that the practitioner set their own goals and really find an ill-defined problem that's going to take them into new areas, things that you might not expect, questions you might not have anticipated in the first place. Our session won't be that useful to you if you're a manager who just wants to tell other people to do assessment. We don't have a lot of advice about that. All right, thanks.
Thank you, and I do want to apologize for not giving the affiliation for our two speakers in that session. April Cunningham is with Palomar College, and Stephanie Rosenblatt is with Cerritos College. Our next two speakers will be Susan Edwards and Lynn Jones from UC Berkeley. They will be talking about every number tells a story, using data to make collection decisions.
Okay, well, it turns out every number doesn't really tell a story. That was a catchy title. Some numbers are just numbers. We have no idea where they came from. They really don't have much meaning. But some numbers do tell stories, and that was the ones that we tried to focus on. Our questions were really very, very much practice-oriented. I came to Berkeley as a new selector, new at Berkeley, and I had responsibility for education, psychology, and social welfare. So that's three large disciplines. They're different from each other. But I had responsibility for fund allocation between those three. And I also serve on the collections budget group, so I was looking at funds across the social sciences. So the problem is that everyone thinks that they are underfunded because they are. We haven't had any increases since 2001, and the rising cost of cereals has had an absolutely negative effect on monographs. We know this. We didn't know if that mattered. So that was one of our research questions. Does it matter? Has our acquisition of monographs actually had a negative impact on our scholars? Another thing that I was trying to tease out, or we were trying to tease out, was how can you fairly or equitably distribute funds across disparate disciplines? Is there any underlying measure that can be used? Because again, the qualitative kind of, but I need more money, it's not a really great way to make a decision. It wasn't enough, so we wanted evidence. And we did do a literature review kind of right off. And we looked and looked and looked, and there's not a ton of literature on how to assess the quality of a collection once we've moved past all those incomplete measures that everyone has already kind of blown apart this morning. And we look at all of them. We look at circulation. We look at whether we're a net lender or a net borrower for interlibrary loan purposes. We look at usage statistics for e-journals. We work with CDL on the journal evaluation projects. Like, those are all great. We're good. But they don't really tell us whether our scholars are being equitably supported in the different disciplines and whether there's a funding allocation issue where one is less funded than another in a way that we can address, right? So that was our question. And with our literature review, we came up with dissertation citation analysis. Everyone wants to not do this because it's really hard. It takes a lot of time. So my teaser to you is that we have something that's really, really going to make it a lot easier and faster next time, phase 2. So anyhow, that's the teaser. But we do have findings from our initial study, and we did actually come up with conclusions that were actionable. And Lynn's going to go over the findings. But there are things that we have worked into our allocation process. At the same time, the building that the Education Psychology Library is in has been deemed not safe. So the library is basically going to go away. So that raised a whole nother set of questions that were collection-based, because much of what we think about, we provide anywhere. We could do a research appointment anywhere. We do instruction anywhere. Who cares where electronic materials are, where they were? They're getting them from home. But the collection itself, and whether you're browsing it, that has a place. So that's a role for the place of the collection that was really important. And we had no way to assess who was using what, because like all good librarians, we don't keep patron-related data about the collection because of privacy issues and concerns. So we only know how many volumes have gone out, but we don't know whether or not they went to people in psychology, for example. So we worked with our library systems office, and this is another thing that I would personally think is a, did I already get the thing? Or that was someone just like scratching, right? Okay, awesome. I have no sense of time, but I feel like 6 minutes is gonna go really fast. Oh, well, you don't even know that I only get 6 minutes. We have a division here. I get 6 minutes. Okay, I'm hurrying. Okay, sorry. Oh my God, I'm already over. Okay, So this is amazing, though. They were able to do snapshot data for us. It's been incredibly helpful. We'll tell you why. We basically are going to be probably closing the library with this data. We're going to be moving it to an electronic era reading room kind of environment. And how we've been able to work with faculty and students is by saying, we actually have data. We know what you're using. Does this mesh with what you think you're using? Does this mesh with how you think you're using the library? And it's been really, really helpful in making those conversations effective and communicating our goals. So, okay. Bottom line, 2 methods, dissertation citation analysis. It told us what the median age was being used. That was also really helpful. Do you want to do backfiles? Do you want to move things to off storage? How old is the material that's being used? Big question, what's the percentage of material that we own? Do we equitably support the disciplines? That's you can debate that measure, whether that's actually valid, but when you're using it on a comparative basis across the disciplines, I think it does have meaning. Okay. I think that's me. How do I? You. Those are our questions. Yeah.
I think Susan actually really said it all. I mean, to be honest, she said it quickly, but she did say it all. We did this research to be able to make practical decisions. We wanted to know certain kinds of information. There's really no point in talking. Let's see. Go down. This is a little bit about who, the 3 departments, they vary quite a bit. Education doesn't really even have an undergraduate major, but has a lot of master's students. Psychology has a lot of undergraduates and not very many master's students. So there were differences in the different departments that we were comparing. We did, as Susan said, come up with some interesting information about what departments use what in their dissertations. You could have predicted maybe that psychology would use a lot of journals. It's not really that surprising. Social welfare, more journals than books, but the parity between education, 3 minutes, and in journals and books, and the amount of web sources that they use, that was interesting to document. The web sources, I have to say, as a category, we didn't really parse that out as well as we would in the future. I mean, it's a mishmash of government documents and some websites and reports. It's just but if we did it again, we would look at that much more closely because I think it could be interesting. We were interested particularly in the age of the citations because this contradicted some of the popular wisdom that people in the sciences don't really look at older materials. So we used the median age. I'm not a statistician, but I do now understand why the median is a better number in many cases than the mean or the average, because the median means that half of your data set is more and half is less, which is different than the mean, and I'm not going to go into that. But just to say that for education, half of the books that were cited were older than 13 years old. That was kind of surprising. In psychology, half of the books that were cited were older than 14 years old. These have implications for storage and various other things, back files. Anyway, then we looked at them combined. Just for kind of interest's sake, these are some of the oldest citations that we found. So, clearly people are citing, John Dewey and really classic works. A lot of them cited Darwin and things like that. So that was just for fun to see how old they were. This is what you're going to see more of in our session. We will reveal the mysterious and important fact of what percentage do we really own of what they cite. And as Susan mentioned, these snapshots that were taken of circulation, that's going to be really interesting because that is really what helped decide whether we should consolidate and how consolidation should or shouldn't happen. So that's a cool slide. Which students in which departments had the longest bibliographies? And the largest and most interesting section for Susan and me is what we learned that we never expected to learn. And this is, we could just go on and on, have a whole session on what we never expected to learn. So, see you later.
Thank you, and that session will be in the Tamil Pius room, which is on the 2nd floor of this building, so you will need to go upstairs for that one. Our last session is, for this segment, will be Adam Siegel from UC Davis is going to be talking about FutureQual, how to keep ARL rankings relevant, something that should be quite interesting given some of what we heard this morning. Yeah.
So I'm going to not offer that many teasers, but I will pretend that I'm a Tyga Forum provocative statement person and state that I'm really not interested myself. Well, I am, but this is not interested as much in assessment as it is in a problem. And the problem for me is money. It's plain and simple. So I'm going to start not with assumptions, but with two questions in a slide. And two questions, assuming you're a UL or someone who has to think like one. So first of all, do ARL rankings matter in general and at your institution in particular? And if so, do you think that the methods of compiling them should be changed? And if so, how? So what we see at my institution, is a disjunct. And I'll say at the outset that I use the MUP rankings, measuring university performance rankings, as my metric for research universities as a whole. I could have used, QS or Shanghai or the Times Education or the USNR, but I used MUP in part because it covered the institutions I wanted to cover inside the UC system, and it had exportable data that I could easily manipulate if I needed to. But what you see with my campus is a steady decline in percentile for our ARL rankings from, right about the 60th percentile down to the bottom quartile in the last, decade or so, while our rank as a research university has climbed. So it's obvious for many reasons that, so this decoupling, so, for Berkeley and LA, you guys continue to be chugging along at the top of both rankings, but for the rest of the UCs, there's some interesting things going on. Outside the top 10 percentile, the hands don't wash. So it's obvious that for many research universities and the libraries and the universities that they serve, the ARL rankings matter. They're announced in campus. Whoops, there's our slide of rankings. They're announced in campus, press releases. They show up in strategic plans. I didn't have a chance to include this, but I see that Berkeley has an acknowledgement in your report. The Senate says to the provost, hey, make sure that the ranking stays high. But, at other institutions, maybe that's not as much of an issue. For the most part, history's shown us that ARL rankings do track closely to the research university rankings, particularly at the very top. Next slide. So as we've seen, this is our rankings, our UC rankings as research universities and not libraries. And you'll see that while most of us, there's Berkeley and LA at the very top, and the rest of us, we're all doing pretty well. We're all Santa Barbara, Riverside, Davis, San Diego, we're all kind of chugging along getting to the top of the research university ranks, while at the same time, we, many of our rankings, again, other than at the very top, continue to go down. So what's going on there? What we've seen, and that's our long-term slide that shows, like in the case of Davis, there's a very precipitous decline from the top quartile in the very early 80s to the bottom quartile right about now, while at the same time our prestige has risen as a research university. One thing that's going on is the question of expenditures. So you've got a case where, Joanne had a portion of the slide, so mine's more fleshed out version. You can see that in some cases, in the case of Davis once again, 7 cents out of every $10 of the campus spend is spent on the library, as opposed to, say, Santa Barbara and LA and Berkeley. And you can see there's a spike there from Santa Barbara. I have no idea what that was. But, Berkeley used to be 6%. Now it's down to about just under 3. San Diego, LA was just under 4. Now it's down to just over 1. But if I were the chancellor at Berkeley, the provost here, I'd go to my chancellor Davis and say, basically, is this a race to the bottom? I'd love, how do you guys do it? How can I spend so little on my library and keep my rankings high? Because we're showing you that it can be done. So what is going on? No, this is where you put on your UL hat and think, oh my God, Davis is only spending 7 cents out of every $10 on his library, and they're, the #1 ag school, the #1 cool school, the #1 this, the #1 that. So what do I do? So it's up to ULs to make the case. So is the current model of ARL sustainable? You can look at the logarithms and all you want, but it basically comes down to the fact that the more money you put in your library, the higher it ranks against other libraries. And the thrifty chancellor might say, so what? It doesn't seem to be affecting the campus and its overall rankings. So as we all know, things grind slowly, but finally in libraries in general. And downward trends are not always indicators of paradigm shifts. So Stein's law says, if something can't go on forever, it won't, i.e., Davis may continue to spend less on his library for Santa Barbara, Riverside, but at some point that may or may not affect our overall research university ranking because our faculty take off, our labs close, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So what's sustainable? Is it collections budgets? And there's our repeat of our Davis slide. There's our Santa Barbara slide. You can see it's even more of a decline, more of a disjunct. So expenditures, and you guys all know this, UCLA and Berkeley spend a lot at the top. The rest of us sort of chug along year in, year out, spending about the same amount overall on our libraries. That's in current dollars. That's measurable. We all spend about the same amount on our collections, and that's another question that I don't really want to get into. What's a collection? As we heard this morning from Tom Leonard, every collection's special. We all are all special snowflakes. We all have our own special things that we do. ARL does not measure them. It can't. It can't measure the science fiction collection or the Dr. Seuss papers or the Emma Goldman papers and the Mark Twain stuff or anything, the critical theory, our holdings in V&E. It doesn't measure any of that. You can granularly do it, but ARL does not do it well. So we can sort of kind of dispense with that. You can sort of, there are ways of getting around that. That's my teaser. We can talk about that in the breakout. But what I'm mostly interested in, there's that other slide, and I'm going to bring it on home, is looking at something that we have not really looked at, which is our untapping the potential of our ARL component that's dormant, our payroll, our human capital. We should make the case that ARLs need to be evaluated like other academic units on campus or like campuses as a whole. USNR, Times Education Supplement, MUP, they look at all kinds of human factors. They look at incoming SAT scores, competitive programs, faculty accomplishments, publications, grants, funded research, awards, scholarly societies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So while the campus as a whole is measured as a complex organism, a living organism, an ARL library, as far as ARL is concerned, is effectively a big, dumb bathtub full of money. You dump the money in. If you dump enough money in, you will go to the top 10. Your strategic plan can say, dump more money in and we'll go to the top. That's how it is. We have payroll statistics. Whoops, excuse me. We have our payroll. And where did my payroll slide go? Is it all the way at the down? Did I lose it? There it is. Okay, cool. Yeah, so when we chug along, we all have payroll. It's counted. We're all here doing things that ARL cares about, but essentially ARL only cares that we're here drawing a paycheck. That's it. So my closer and my teaser is, why don't we start looking at ourselves the way that the university as a whole looks at all the people that are in the university. So in other words, not so much making it count, but making us count. And that's my closer, and I hope I made my time, and I'll see you on the breakout.